Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Needville Global Methodist Church YouTube channel. This is our weekly book study, Bible study, gathering, devotional, whatever you'd like to call it. Sometimes it's a Bible study where we're going to study the Bible. Sometimes it's group study where we're going to do something else. Right now, we're in the middle of a series talking about how to have a healthy, safe, good marriage. All right, that's what we're talking about, a Christian marriage, and how we can build those marriages up. Now, as I've said before, this whole piece is the fact that whether you're in the area of your life where you are married or you're in an area of your life where you're not going to be married, whether you're widowed or you're too young, whatever the case may be. At the end of the day, we all need this kind of a person in our lives. We all need that kind of intimacy that you find in marriage. That intimacy where you have someone else that you are sharing your life with. That's how we were built. We were built to have relationships, and this kind of this kind of integral, uh, informative and deep relationship with one other with another person is something that is of vast importance, regardless of whether you're looking to actually put a ring on someone's finger or not. So what I hope is that going through all of this, you find that all of these pieces of information that we'll talk about will help you to build a relationship with someone, whether they're your spouse or not. Now, we're going to use the spousal language as we walk through it, but hopefully it helps you in all aspects. Now, before we go any further, I do want to say, ask you, if you haven't done so already, to hit the subscribe button on the video down below. That'll make sure that you have all the information that goes on here on our YouTube channel. We have sermons, we have Bible studies, we have devotionals, and we also use this as an informative tool so that when we do need to get information out to the whole congregation, this is one of the best ways we have. So if you would like to know more about what the congregation is doing, what the church is doing, this is one of your best spots to do it. So hit that subscribe button. Hitting the like button on the video is also very powerful and positive. It makes sure that the video is not only given out to others so that it might help them as well as it helped you, but it also lets me know that you liked the video. And then, of course, use the comment section down below to let me know what you liked, what you didn't, what worked, what didn't, what you'd like to see next. As soon as this series is over, we're going to get into something new. So if you have questions, if you have something else, please use that comment section to converse with me, talk with me, and give me feedback on what's going on in your life. So let's dive into our lesson for today. Now, as I said, we are using a book that I hand out to every couple. Ever since I found this book, I hand it out to every couple that I do premarital counseling with. I hand it out to any couple who comes into my office and says, we need help. I am not a psychiatrist, nor am I a licensed therapist, but this book has not only helped so many others that I know of personally, I can personally also tell you that it helped my marriage too. It is a powerful book that helps so many people really come and build a strong relationship. It's called The 7 Principles for Making Marriage Work, and it's by a gentleman by the name of Dr. John Gottman. The link in the description will take you to the Amazon page, and you can purchase it for yourself. And I strongly encourage you to do so. It is a wonderful tome of knowledge about how to build a healthy and strong marriage. Now, as I've said in the past, I don't know where Dr. Gottman's faith is. I would hope that he has a faith to Christ, but I don't know him personally. And his book is more of a book that is a self-help guide, helpful guide for people who want to have a strong marriage, and therefore is not necessarily focused on a faith-driven marriage. So I always want to incorporate that faith side of things, because the fact is that I don't care how strong you make your marriage, if it doesn't have that third cord, which is God, it's not going to go very well for you. So scripture helps to undergird everything that we're going to talk about. And today we are talking about overcoming gridlock. Now, that's a term that Dr. Gottman uses, and I'll explain it here in a second. But last week we talked about how we're supposed to go after the low-hanging fruit, right? Solve the solvable problems. Well, if you've been in a marriage for, I don't know, a week, you've figured out that there are going to be problems that are certainly solvable, but there are also going to be issues that come up that are completely unsolvable because they go to the heart and soul of your partner. Now, one of two things can happen when you come up against a problem like that. The first is, and it's the wrong way to do it, but the first is we have to split up, right? We divorce, go separate ways. This is unattainable. We can't make it work between the two of us. And I get it. There are going to be some times when that might feel the way that it is, but my hope is that through what we talk about today, you might be able to overcome that kind of gridlock and realize that just because we're not of the same mind on this particular point, we can still make this whole thing work. Now, I do want to go into scripture before we go any further, because I think Paul has something to tell us here about what we're trying to accomplish in this lesson in the 14th chapter of his letter to the Romans. And I'm going to be in verse 10, and I'm just going to finish out the chapter. So 10 through 13. And it says this: why do you pass judgment on your brother or sister? Or why do you despise your brother or sister? For we will all stand before the judgment seat of God. For it is written, as I live, says the Lord, every knee shall bow to me, every tongue shall confess, and shall praise to God. So then each of us will be accountable to God. Therefore, let us no longer pass judgment on one another, but resolve instead never to put a stumbling block or hindrance in the way of another. And this was Paul's words to people. And if you read the entirety of the 14th chapter, you would find that this is he's getting to this point of saying, okay, look, guys, you're all going to practice your faiths slightly different from each other. I like going back to John Wesley's quote, obviously a lot further along in the time frame from Paul, but I think he was right too. He said, in the essentials, we need to be the same. Jesus Christ is Lord and Savior. He died on a cross. He raised from dead. The essentials of the faith, we all need to be uniform, right? We all need to be congruent together. But he said, in all other things, we need to show grace. Essentially saying, in all the other stuff that's not essential, we can be forgiving. We can be understanding. We can sit there and say, that's not the way that I understand it, but it's okay. I still can call you my brother. I still can call you my sister. I still can accept the fact that you are saved just like I am saved, because we both have the same idea on the essentials. And that's kind of what this is about. So when we're talking about this gridlock idea, we're talking about issues between you and your spouse that are not going to be overcome with compromise. They're not going to be overcome with just talking about it. In all fairness, they're not going to be overcome at all. They're going to have to be just lived with and dealt with and figured out as you move along. Now, I want to start this whole thing out with saying that in order to do any of this, you have to do the other things first. You have to make sure that your spouse knows that you love them. You have to be filled with grace and forgiveness as you go forward. And as we talked about before, the biggest piece on top of all of that is making sure that you don't hold on to the grudges that will come when those things are broken. Because as you talk and as you decide, okay, this is how we're going to navigate these particular pieces of the relationship, I can guarantee you that eventually, somewhere down the road, your spouse is going to break that agreement. They're going to make a mistake. They're going to do something wrong. It will be up to you to forgive them for it and to move on and to focus on the good and positive things that they've done, that they spent that long before they made that mistake. And now we're going to fix it and go forward. That's what's going to be needed in order to get through this point, because it's the gridlock pieces that can really destroy a relationship like a marriage. So when you get into a gridlock situation, and I'm going to talk about it in generality, and then I'm going to give you an example of something that happened in my marriage and in my life, and hopefully you can extrapolate everything from that and help it to help your marriage as you move forward with your spouse. So first and foremost, you want to try and understand the root of the issue. Okay. My senior pastor that I served under for a number of years in Livingston always used to have a saying. I loved it. I stole it. I'll give him full credit for it, but I continue to use it over and over again. The problem is not the problem, is what he used to say, essentially meaning that just because someone comes into my office and is mad and angry and yelling or whatever, they're upset with whatever just happened in the church. Most of the time, their anger is not really directed at that little thing that's happened inside the church. It's the fact that they have another problem that's going on in their lives, and it is causing stress. And maybe it's a problem that they can't fix. So then they get this other thing that's an inconvenience, and they explode on it because they can try to fix that one by coming into my office or coming into a board meeting or whatnot. So the problem is never the problem. So that's the idea, is that when you come to this time of gridlock, when you come to this place in your relationship, first and foremost, you and your spouse need to make sure that you are talking apples to apples. You are making sure that you are talking about the correct problem and not all these extra stuff. Make sure you get down to the very root of what it is that is causing this conflict. And then you can start discussing it. All right. The second thing, once you've gone down and you figured out, okay, this is where we're separated, right? This is the piece right here that she and I or he and I don't see eye to eye on at all. We are fundamentally different in the way that we understand this. Okay. The second thing, I know it's an easy way out. It's a cheap shot, but it's the truth. Communicate, discuss, talk about it. Now, by doing this, you need to make sure that you're talking calmly about this. Remember, this is a topic that you and your spouse do not get along on. You don't see eye to eye on. So you have to be very careful about how you talk about it. This isn't one of those times when you can just nonchalantly spout off something, because it's going to come off offensive. It's going to come off as attacking towards your spouse. And that's not what you want to do, because all that will do is just escalate the whole situation again. So you want to be calm. You want to be thoughtful about what you say. Be honest. 100% be honest. Tell your spouse, this is why I believe this way. This is how I see it. But don't come at them trying to change their mind. You're trying to understand them. As I tell my sons all the time, listen to the person that's talking to you. Don't listen to respond. Listen to understand. Don't just sit there listening to them and formulating your own argumentation to undermine what they've just said. No, you sit there and you listen to them with the mindset of, I'm trying to understand their point of view. I'm trying to put myself into their shoes and understand where they're coming from and understand why this is important, why they believe this way, why they see the world this way, whatever the case may be. That's how you communicate. Now, the third piece that you need to look at is you need to find places in this that are non-negotiable and places that are flexible. Again, we're going back to that whole compromise thing, right? Last week, we talked about finding things that were compromisable where both parties got everything they wanted. That can happen with those simple solvable problems. But with the gridlock problems, the unsolvable problems, that's not going to be the case. Someone's going to have to give up something, and the other is going to have to give up something different if you're going to come to a compromise here. All right. So the biggest thing that you can do is, again, being honest with each other, coming to the table and saying, this piece right here, I can't budge on. That is who I am. That is what I believe in. There's nothing that you can say that's going to change my mind on it. And it's the piece that I absolutely agree with 100%. I will not budge on that point. Now, you can't come to the table and say, I won't budge on any of it. All right, let's not do that. But you can come to the table and say, these are the pieces that I can't compromise on. All right. That's part of that communication, being able to figure out, okay, we can work with this piece. We can't work with that piece. We can negotiate that piece. That piece has to stay the way it is. Right. That's how you go through that. Finally, the last piece of this is, in the discussion on a calm note, express thanks. Again, going back to that whole thing of turning towards your partner, towards your spouse, and not away from them. Now, I'm going to tell you, this discussion is going to last a lot longer than one night. All right. You're not going to be able to sit down on the couch one night, have this discussion, and leave, and everything's calm, everything's taken care of. The unsolvable problem is dealt with. That's just not how life works. You know this. If you've been married for longer than about a week, you know this to be true. That's not how it works. So the understanding is the fact that you're going to take breaks, right? In this discussion. It's going to take weeks, if not months, if not years, to nuance these things. All right. Now, what I will tell you, and I tell this to a lot of couples that come into my office, having a third party, especially with something like this, these unsolvable problems, having a third party that can listen and help diffuse the situation is one of the most important things you could possibly do. So finding a marriage counselor that would be willing to sit in and listen to a conversation that you have about this particular problem is a wonderful tool to use if you can get a hold of one. But having someone else that is a third party, that you don't have a problem with them listening to you and hearing both sides and being intimate in that relationship in that way, that is one of the best ways to do it. But the biggest thing is that after a discussion, no matter how heated it got, no matter how unnerving it got, no matter how angry anyone got, end the conversation the right way. Give your spouse a hug. Tell them that you love them. Tell them that in spite of everything that was talked about, in spite of all the stuff, in spite of the fact that clearly you don't see eye to eye on that particular topic, and maybe after that long discussion, you start to doubt whether you could see eye to eye on anything. Tell them that you still love them. Turn towards your partner. Always. Now, I told you that I was going to give you a personal example about all this and tell you how this whole thing kind of works. So in my family, when my wife and I got married, I married a Baptist. And I am not. This really didn't cause any kind of problem when we first got married. The first time it caused problems was when we first had children. My oldest was born, and I was raised, my theology and my job as pastor, we believe in infant baptism. Believe that that's the way that it should work. That's the way that it ought to work. And that's what I wanted to do for my oldest son, is to have him baptized in the church. My wife, on the other hand, was raised as a Baptist, which they do believers' baptisms, which means that they don't baptize a child until the child is old enough to be able to speak their faith on their own accord. Now, the problem that made this into such a unsolvable one is the fact that as a Methodist, I also believe in one other piece, that there is only one baptism. So so when we first started talking about it, and the idea was, oh, okay, well, we'll have him baptized as an infant, and then when he gets older, he can go get baptized later. I said, that's not going to work for me. I'm going to teach him that it's not okay to go get baptized a second time, because that's part of the theology and part of what I teach through the church. So anyway, through our conversations, we had truckloads of conversations while she was pregnant with our oldest, and even after he was born. I can't tell you how much reading and how many blogs and websites and people that I talked to, trying to come to some kind of compromise that would celebrate both of our understandings and both of our faiths. I worked tirelessly. And unfortunately, I came to the same conclusion that I came to at the very beginning. These two theologies, these two faiths, these two understandings were incompatible with each other. And so at the end of the day, after long conversations, we came to the final conclusion that we had my son, both of our sons, baptized as infants in the church. Now, that's not to say that my wife won't teach them as they grow up what she learned in her faith, and I want her to do that. But at the end of the day, I tried to find, and she tried to find, ways that we could honor each other while still remaining true to what we believed. And that's exactly what we did. And as I said, it wasn't perfect. There were plenty of arguments at night. There were plenty of evenings that we went to bed really upset with each other. But this was an unsolvable problem. There was no solution. We had to find the areas that we could compromise on, the areas that we couldn't compromise on. And then at the end of the day, we had to make a decision and move forward with it. And in this particular example, although there are others where it went another direction, in this particular aspect, my beliefs, my understanding was the one that prevailed. And the reason for that was twofold. The first was that because of my position as the pastor of the church, it seemed to be a little awkward if the pastor, who tells all the people in the congregation, you should get your children baptized as infants, then turned around and didn't get his own children baptized as infants. But the second part was that on this particular aspect, my wife does look to me as the spiritual head of the household and says, your job is to lead us in the right way. I follow what you have to say. And in this particular aspect, I end up taking the lead and taking the head of this decision. Now, it's not to say that's the only always the way that it goes. There's plenty of times when she takes the lead and takes the head and makes the decisions herself. That we'll get into that aspect in either next week or the following week about how to figure out, that particular aspect. But at the end of the day, sometimes in these unsolvable problems, one person is going to have to get their way while the other doesn't. And through conversation with each other, grace and love, lots of prayer, and compassion for the other, you can come out the other side just as strong, if not stronger, than you were before you came up against an unmovable, unbendable, and unbreakable object. And the reason for all of it is because you have the one who creates and destroys all things in God.